This is an advanced lymphatic drainage complex. Please read the details and notes for further information before beginning and contraindications. We stimulate all the joints in the body, beginning with the lower area of the body and the ankles. The lymph flows from the extremities to the heart, so we move in that direction through this entire practice. We make 9 circles in one direction and then 9 circles in the other direction. We then begin to point and flex our ankle 9 times. We curl the toes under and stamp them into the floor, gently stretching the tendons on the top of the foot and up the shin, and then invert the ankle to stretch the muscles on the outside of the lower leg, holding for 9 seconds. We'll now repeat everything on the other leg. It's perfectly okay to hold an item like a broom in one hand for balance, or to place a finger against a wall in order to secure our balance while we're doing this practice. We will now begin squat circles, holding our knees and keeping the feet close together, the knees touching. We make 9 circles in one direction and 9 in the other. Optionally, you may use your hands to rub the area of the knees in order to stimulate the lymph nodes a little more. And now coming into a wider stance, we begin to circle the knees in and out 9 times in one direction, followed by 9 in the other. We will now bring one knee to a 90-degree angle in a balance, and we begin to circle from the knee joint 9 times in one direction, followed by 9 in the other. When we're finished, we'll repeat that on the other side. And now moving up to the hip joint, we make 9 circles in one direction, followed by 9 in the other. Please be sure to keep your circles at a diameter that does not create popping or clicking in the joint. If so, just reduce the range of motion slightly. We will now do 9 pelvic rotations in one direction, followed by 9 in the other. We're standing somewhat close together in the feet and circling the pelvis, bringing the head and the shoulders around the foundation. We can arch back slightly to feel that we're driving the hips forward and driving the hips back. Keep the back nice and long. And now we move to trunk rotations, keeping the pelvis where it is and the feet about hip distance apart. We begin to move the shoulder girdle around the pelvis, moving the head along with it. We find a little bit of a standing back bend here, but be careful not to hyperextend too far in the low back. We now find torso turns, keeping our hands at about chest level and the elbows wide apart. We side turn into a range where we hold the end rather than jerking in and out of it. It's a nice, slow, deliberate movement. And you'll probably notice that with each turn, you're able to see a little further, creating space in the torso. Moving to the shoulder joints, we begin forward rotations for 9, really getting the shoulder blades and the collarbones involved in this movement. And 9 backward shoulder rotations. We now interlace the fingers in front of us and bring the elbows together and begin to make 9 rotations with the forearms in one direction, followed by 9 in the other. You should feel that this is stretching the tendons and the muscles of the upper arms, leading back to the shoulders. Trying to keep the elbows as close together as we move through these rotations. We now bring the fingertips to the shoulders, the elbows pointing forward, and we move one shoulder up and one shoulder down as we move in antagonist circles. One is moving in one direction and the other in the opposite. This exercise not only works to bring a lot of synovial fluid into the shoulder joints, but also it works on our cognitive function as we use our brain to move in 2 different directions. Extend the arms out to the sides of the shoulders, moving into our Tibetan twists. We pronate and supinate the palms, but keep the arms completely straight, facilitating these turns out of the shoulder girdle rather than through the elbows or the wrists. When we're done with 9 twists, with the hands out to the sides, we'll lift them up into a wide position. And again, facilitating the turns out of the scapula of the shoulders. We feel the scapula moving up and down the back of the body. And then with the hands extended in front of the shoulders, we continue with 9 more twists being facilitated from the shoulder girdle. Reaching forward and back, we feel the scapula opening and squeezing behind the body. We'll now bring the arms out and begin to let the forearms hang relaxed and facilitating circles from the elbow joints. 9 in one direction, followed by 9 in the other. Keeping the arms extended, we begin wrist circles, 9 in one direction and 9 in the other. And bringing the palms up and down into wrist flexion and wrist extension 9 times. We now make fists and we open the joints, moving sequentially from each joint in to out. And we will do 36 of these, beginning to feel that we're sort of flicking the fingers out through the sequential opening of the joints, increasing our chi. We now do finger wiping passes. We clasp one finger with the front 2 knuckles of the other hand and squeezing and briskly sweeping them down the other finger in order to release tension. We now begin our neck exercises. We rotate the head from left to right 9 times, coming full range of motion, standing in a nice upright neutral posture. Coming to neutral, we begin to look up and down, bringing the chin all the way down to the chest. But when we look up, we only bring it to about a 45-degree angle so that we do not hyperextend the cervical spine. Inhaling up and exhaling down. And the last time we look down, we can hold this for about 9 seconds, really feeling the stretch down the back. We now begin neck rotations, turning our nose 9 times in one direction and 9 times in the other. Again, being mindful to not hyperextend the neck so that we bring that range of motion to a comfortable circle. We now begin ear strokes. We hold the top of the ear with 2 fingers of one hand, and with the other, we create 9 strokes, squeezing the outside of the ear and pulling down through the bottom of the earlobe. We now begin our eye exercises. Keeping our head in a forward-facing position, we begin to look through the full range of motion, right to left. We can use the hands to hold the chin here in order to keep the head from becoming involved in this movement, isolating just the muscle of the eyes. After 9 glances, we can look up and down 9 times, as if we were trying to look through the skull, the forehead, up to the ceiling, and down through the cheekbones. After 9, we begin rotations 9 times counterclockwise and 9 times counterclockwise, or vice versa. Be careful not to mow the edges of the corners of the circles, but rather keep the circles so that there's a nice fluid movement. We will now begin a series of padding movements, keeping our elbows close to our sides. We begin to rotate the torso to create floppy arms. We use the palms to create slaps against the body in all places, with the rib cage, the hips, the hip flexors, the navel, and then 3 times up and down the arms, covering all the area, front, back, and sides. Down the sides of the body from the armpits to the inguinal area, 3 times. And then taking our hands behind our back, we make 3 slaps around the kidneys and then begin to move down the back of the legs, over the front of the ankles, up through the middle of the legs to the torso. And we make this pattern 3 times from top to bottom and bottom to top. We now work on the sutures of the skull, from the forehead to the base of the skull and around the tops of the ears in 3 full circles. We now begin our face washes, draining the face with 3 full swipes, and then taking the hands to the chin, we shake off the energy through the arms, through the feet, and the hands. And we begin our heel tap, heel jumps. We lift into the balls of the feet, and we allow the heels to drop down against the earth, creating a reverberation through all the extremities and the cells of our body. Creating movement in all of the lymphatic ducts. We find 108 heel jumps. And now we'll bring the feet a little wider than the hips as we begin to stroke our energy sphere. We make passes of the hands and the arms through this area around our body. It can be as simple as just opening the body. It could be that we're writing letters of the alphabet, or it could be that we're setting an intention, that we're holding like a sphere of light or energy with an intention of something like love or healing, whatever it is that we'd like to create more of in our life today. You can just visualize that we're bringing more of it into our hemisphere. When we're finished, we can open the arms, taking a couple nice deep breaths, and move into a seated position. We can find our sitting bones as we begin our pelvic floor exercises. We'll find 3 sets of 9 Kegels as we lift the pelvic floor up, squeezing the sphincter muscles and the perineum and holding at the top, and then coming to relax for 9 repetitions. Take a couple nice deep breaths just to reset in between sets. Pelvic floor exercises are not only good for increasing blood flow, circulation, they also help with urinary incontinence and increasing health of the reproductive organs. And it even stimulates our bowel production. So as we create detoxification in the body, we also want to pay special attention to our detoxification pathways. Again, resting for a few relaxing breaths in between our sets. And now moving into our third and final set of 9 Kegels. We now move into a seated position on our mat with our hands behind us and our legs extended out, the feet at the width of the mat. We begin to gently rock the knees through a full range of motion, left to right, for 9 repetitions. Next, we lay against the mat with our hands over our head and move the knees side to side 9 times through a full range of motion. And finally, we can move into the full range and use the outer foot against the inner knee to create just a little further stretch in the outer hip joint. When we're ready, we'll move into a bridge pose with our arms extended above our head. And lowering the hips, we move into a single leg boat pose, alternating legs for 9 repetitions. You can modify this portion of the exercise in any way in order to begin building the abdominal strength that's necessary to develop this over time. When we're finished with our single leg bridges, we can lift into one isolated bridge pose, holding for 9 seconds. We can now move into a butterfly pose as we begin our abdominal massage. We begin by bringing our fingers to the solar plexus area in between the rib cage under the sternum. And we begin to create space under the left rib cage. And then gently creating circles of massage down the left side of the body to the top of the pubic bone. We continue to bring that circle and massage over to the right side and back up the rib cage, where we again create a little space for the diaphragm. We can bring our hands to the top of our pubic bone and gently make strokes up the center of the abdomen to the solar plexus. We begin to gently massage over the area of the liver and the gallbladder under the right rib cage. And then also over to the left side, over the spleen. We move down over the area of the bladder, the reproductive organs, and then begin to create some sweeping movements of the palms and finding little slaps and pats and taps against the entire inguinal area up to the solar plexus and all around the rib cage and the abdominal area. When we are ready, we can move into a short rest period of deep breaths. Finding about 3 big diaphragmatic breaths here in 3 parts from the abdomen, through the rib cage, up to the collarbones, and then from the collarbones, through the rib cage, back to the abdomen. When we're ready, we can bring the feet together at the center line of the mat and stretch the arms over the head. And when we're ready, we can do a sit-up, reaching for the toes. We'll now move into a standing position on our mats, beginning our breathing optimization sequence. Preparing for our first round of breath of fire for 36 breaths, we inhale and exhale deeply and begin our deep out breaths. When finished, we take a deep in breath, fill the lungs with air, and hold that as we make 18 backward shoulder rotations. When complete, we take a deep exhale, moving into a forward-facing position. And finding our abdominal vacuum, we hold for 10 seconds. Exhaling and inhaling. Exhaling. We stand as we take a nice big in-breath and start our whistler breaths for 5 whistling out breaths. Relaxing our respiratory system to prepare for our second round. Moving now into our second round of breath of fire, we inhale and exhale deeply as we come into 36 forcible out breaths. Inhaling deeply, we retain the breath as we begin 18 forward shoulder rotations. And exhaling deeply, we move into our forward position to prepare for our abdominal vacuum. Holding that vacuum for 10 seconds. You release the breath, exhaling deeply, inhaling to stand, and finding 5 whistler breaths to prepare ourselves for our next round. Now coming into our third round, we prepare ourselves again, inhaling and exhaling deeply for 36 forcible out breaths of breath of fire. Inhaling, coming to breath retention, we begin opening and closing the shoulders 18 times. When we're ready, we can exhale into a forward bend, bringing ourselves into our vacuum. Inhaling and exhaling. We inhale to stand, finding 5 whistler breaths, relaxing the respiratory system as we prepare for round 4. Coming into round 4, we begin with breath of fire, inhaling and exhaling deeply for 36 forcible out breaths. Inhaling deeply, we begin to cross our body with the arms in order to create slaps against the back of the rib cage. 18 times. Exhaling into our forward bend, we find our abdominal vacuum. Inhaling and exhaling deeply. We inhale to stand and find 5 of our whistler breaths. Coming into round 5, we prepare for breath of fire, inhaling and exhaling. We begin our forcible exhales for 36. Inhaling deeply, we hold the breath as we begin to use our cupping hands to create pats and suction against the rib cage, the chest, top of the shoulders, and the sternum. Exhaling deeply into our forward bend, we come into our 10-second vacuum. Releasing the vacuum, exhaling deeply. Inhaling to stand, we find 5 of our whistler breaths, relaxing the respiratory system. Good work. And now preparing ourselves for Shavasana. We can come down to the mat, hugging our knees into our chest. And when we're ready, we can bring the feet down to the mat, bringing ourselves into a very relaxed position. And now please enjoy the 6-minute Shavasana. Inhaling and exhaling deeply. We reset the respiratory system as we return to the present moment on our mat. When we're ready, we can begin to make small movements in small places, reawakening the physical body. You can find a nice long stretch before we move into a fetus position on our mat. Taking this time of self-nurturing and gratitude, you can find a few reflective breaths. And only when we're ready, we can slowly bring ourselves into an upright seated position on our mat. Bring our hands into heart center. Namaste.